Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the first instalment of Soldiers of the Five Continents, a series in which I will tell the stories of the many movements across the world who have, in their own way, struggled for the emancipation of the human race in modern times. From the Paris Commune to the Maoists of Nepal, I'll be giving an overview of their history, their success, their failures, and my impression of them as a whole. This promises to be quite an ambitious project spanning many videos, and I hope comrades find it useful and informative. Of course, 15-minute videos can hardly do these movements justice, but as an introduction, I hope these inspire you all to do more research on these movements and draw whatever lessons you can from them. The first of these historic movements I'll be looking at is that of the men and women of the Paris Commune, the first seizure of power by the working class in modern history. The year was 1870, and France under Napoleon III had been defeated by the forces of Prussia in the disastrous Franco-Prussian War. Paris had come under siege in September and was suffering from food shortages. The city had long been a hotbed of dissent since the 1830s due to a growing wealth gap and an antagonistic contradiction between the workers and the emerging bourgeois class, which became acute during the months of war and food shortages. The French government eventually surrendered Paris to the German Empire, allowing them a brief military occupation of the city. This greatly alienated the embittered and war-weary Parisian workers from the bourgeois government, and their response was the Paris Commune. The dire military situation had led the government to conscript a civilian militia known as the National Guards to help defend Paris. Composed of the working class and intelligentsia of the city, armed with their weapons and artillery of the time, the Guardsmen were able to elect their own officers and leaders, many of whom included revolutionary socialists in their ranks, who proceeded to form a central committee to provide leadership against both the German imperialism and the royalist factions of the government, who had already realised that the Central Committee was already a rival to its control over the population. The militia, meanwhile, took steps to fortify the city against attacks with expropriated cannons and barricades. The government sent troops to reclaim these weapons, but morale in the army was low, and soldiers instead joined with the workers of Paris and executed their own leaders. In the face of this insurrection, the government abandoned Paris, withdrawing the remaining loyal troops and officials from the cities. Similar actions also occurred in other French cities, such as Lyon. Armed conflict between the government and the so-called communards began on the 2nd of April, with the government occupation of the nearby suburb of Courbevoie and an abortive communard march on Versailles the next day. The communards had become increasingly radical, adopting the red flag of socialism as their banner and taking an internationalist stance, due in part to the large number of exiled radicals from other European countries residing in Paris at the time. Recognizing the threat this new radicalism posed to the existing power structure of bourgeois France, the French government, led by Adolphe Thiers, negotiated the release of French prisoners of war from the German military in order to bolster their numbers to combat the insurgency. Trade unions and socialist organizations abroad demonstrated and sent messages of support to the Commune. However, a communication blackout was placed around the city, cutting Paris off from the outside world. Paris was once again under siege, this time from the French government, and on May 21st, reactionaries allowed Thiers' men to enter the city, and soon they conquered many districts, facing uncoordinated resistance and summarily executing civilians and National Guardsmen suspected of aiding the communards, who responded by threatening to execute 3 of the hostages they'd taken from the Versailles government for every Parisian prisoner killed. The working class and poor districts resisted the government for the longest, but by May 21st, Paris was back under government control and the Commune was defeated. And in the following weeks, thousands were executed, imprisoned, and deported for their involvement in the 6-week rebellion. But aside from the heroics of the communards, what is it that makes the Paris Commune such a special event to socialists? Paris of 1871 laid out the pattern for revolutionary conditions in modern capitalist era. A destabilized bourgeois government, a hostile and disenfranchised working class, and economic failure, leading to a workers' revolution and the beginnings of an internationalist workers' state. The Commune is an example of radical social democracy in action, taking measures such as the implementation of workers' self-management, extreme democracy with elected officials subject to recall at any time, separation of church and state, cancellation of interest on debts, and people's militias. A feminist movement, the Women's Union of Defense of Paris and Care of the Injured, was set up to campaign for women's rights by a female member of the Russian section of the First International, Elizabeth Dmitriev. And free education, food and clothing was provided to children as well as specialised training to skills workers for free. The commune was run at a local level by democratic workers' councils who provided food in the form of communal canteens, healthcare and other social necessities to the Parisian citizens. Karl Marx would later describe the commune as an ideal model for the dictatorship of the proletariat, writing, "The working men's Paris, with its commune, will forever be celebrated as a glorious harbinger of a new society. Its martyrs are enshrined in the great heart of the working class. Its exterminators' history has already nailed that eternal pillory for which all prayers of their priests will not avail to redeem them." Although he did criticise the Commune's moderate leadership for not going far enough to fight Thiers' government and implement radical measures, a feeling echoed by socialist leaders such as Lenin and Mao. This criticism was one of the ideological differences which eventually led to a split between Marxists and anarchists, who felt that maintaining the extreme democratic libertarian aspects of the Commune was more important than sacrificing them in the name of defeating the government. The exciting thing about the Commune was that it was the first true example of the working class taking control of society through armed struggle and empowering themselves in ways never seen before through the implementation of radical social democracy. The workers realised that they could neither depend on or trust the bourgeois state, and nor did they need to. The workers' government of Paris gives us a new model for the construction of an egalitarian, democratic, revolutionary society. We can draw many lessons from its failures, such as the need to balance revolutionary principles with the need to defeat external threats militarily. 140 years have passed since the days of the Commune, but so much about that time in history still rings true today. Though technology and culture have evolved greatly in this time, the relations between the workers and the means of production remains the same, as does the state and working and bourgeois classes, and of course, the nature of capitalism. The Paris Commune shows us how changing these relationships affects the revolutionary consciousness of the people, how the bourgeois will do anything necessary in order to remain dominant over the proletariat, and the contradictions between the interests of classes and an escalation of class struggle will inevitably lead to an attempt at proletarian revolution. Marxists, anarchists, and revolutionary socialists of all types the world over today view the Commune as a source of inspiration and draw from the lessons of this chapter in history in their own struggles to emancipate the working people, just as the Parisians did for 6 weeks in 1871. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it informative. Please feel free to expand or ask questions about anything I've said in a comment or video response, and look out for the next instalment of Soldiers of the Five Continents, as well as the next edition of Marxism Explained, which will be focusing on workers' self-management. Red salutes, comrades.